Hello, everyone. Welcome to Against the Fraud, where we help people better understand whistleblowers, fraud investigations, and the False Claims Act. I am your host, Joseph Delsoin, and today I am joined by Janis Gorton, an experienced whistleblower attorney, to discuss what this work looks like, what potential whistleblowers should understand, and what happens behind the scenes when attorneys evaluate complex fraud allegations. This conversation is for educational purposes only and should not be considered legal advice. Every situation is different, and anyone who believes they may have information about fraud should speak directly with a qualified attorney. Janis, welcome to Against the Fraud. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you for asking me.
No problem. And for people who may not know you, can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you became a whistleblower attorney?
Yes. So I'm currently senior counsel at the firm Schneider Wallace Cottrell Kim. I have been doing whistleblower work for almost 18 years. It's been a minute. It's a passion of mine. It's just about the only area of law that I've done. Because I get so much out of it. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. And did you always expect to practice in this area of law?
No, I did not even know this area of law existed when I was in law school. I don't know that there were any classes about that. The way I found it was I, back in 2008, applied for a document review job, just a little contract, document review job. And it was for a False Claims Act case. And it was a healthcare fraud case. And right away, it just lit me up. I mean, I was very upset about the allegations in that case. Yeah. So that was supposed to be a 2-month assignment. I ended up staying at that firm for about, I think, 14 years. Just kind of worked my way up and just fall in love with it.
Okay, that's awesome. And what keeps you committed to this work till this day?
A number of things. I mean, one is that it is very satisfying to give whistleblowers a voice. A lot of times people have already tried to stop something that's wrong. So it's, they're very appreciative of, somebody who's willing to listen to them and take them seriously and, walk with them on that journey. So I love that. And I also love working with the government to help them, resolve fraud, basically help them investigate cases. I'm sort of the gap. I sort of bridge the gap between, the individual that knows all the inside details about the fraud and the entity that can really do something about it.
Okay, yes, that's awesome. Yeah, I think that's very important because whistleblowers, they need somebody to go to as far as what they're experiencing. So I'm glad you're doing the work you're doing.
Thank you.
And just for those who may not know, could you explain what the False Claims Act is and why it's such an important tool for combating fraud?
Absolutely. So the False Claims Act is actually a very old statute. It was enacted. Yeah, it was enacted during the Civil War. Sometimes it's called Lincoln's Law. The reason it was enacted is that there were bad actors defrauding the Union troops, selling them things like, sawdust and saying it was gunpowder, for example. And so they passed a statute which enabled a whistleblower to file a lawsuit on behalf of the government. And that lawsuit's filed under seal. It's served on the government. It's not served on the defendant right away. And the whistleblower, works with the government, provides information to enable them to recover funds that they wouldn't have paid had they known that there was really a fraudulent scheme going on, or to help them get money from the defendant that, the company may be held on to that they shouldn't have held on to. So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Oh, wow. Yeah, thank you for the history. I wasn't aware of that. Okay, that's very interesting. And who can potentially become a whistleblower? What qualifies a whistleblower?
Almost anybody. You don't have to have worked for the company. One company can even blow the whistle on another company. There are cases that are out there about that. So really, if you know of a fraud, if you strongly suspect something's not right, you should probably reach out to an attorney, because there's a chance that it's not. So yeah. That helps.
And as far as a whistleblower getting the confidence to speak with an attorney, because I think whistleblowers, they may feel a sense of they don't want to get involved, they don't want to ruin their job or get fired, things of that nature. What would you say to that person that wants to do the right thing, but they're held back by those type of things?
Well, a couple things. One is that the False Claims Act does have an anti-retaliation provision. So, so if that individual, puts the company on notice that they're committing violations, and then that company retaliates, if their employer, retaliates against them for that, they, can go after, they can sue the employer under that provision. But, I never try to pressure anybody into bringing a case. It's a very personal decision. I've had some whistleblowers file cases and then they decide to get out of, the industry they're in. And, some people can do that and some can't. So, I tell them that the cases are filed under seal. So, and in my experience, cases can stay under seal for, at least several years. So there is that time frame where, the defendant hadn't been served with the complaint. But ultimately, just about every case comes out from under seal. So I do counsel, I do tell them that. And it's something that they have to be, on some level okay with, it happening at some point. But yeah, I always, I commend them for doing the right thing. And, I just listen. I just listen to them.
Yeah. I asked that question because I came across a Facebook group and I seen just a few comments about some people that was actually whistleblowers, and they said that the company ruined their lives and got them fired and all kinds of things. And I was just afraid of people seeing those comments and saying, I don't want to get involved with that. And so thank you for sharing that information, because I think it's helpful for people to move forward if they do see something.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when it becomes to suspicious activity, is there a difference between suspicious conduct, unethical conduct, and potential fraud involving government funds? Is there?
Yeah. And that's the thing that, the False Claims Act only covers, federal funds, right? And so I do have people who come and they say, my company is doing something that is unethical. But if it doesn't involve federal funds, then you really can't do anything about that under the False Claims Act. There are other whistleblower programs. The IRS has a whistleblower program. The Securities and Exchange Commission has a whistleblower program. So sometimes things don't fit within the False Claims Act, but maybe there's, a tax fraud issue. The False Claims Act doesn't cover tax fraud. So the IRS has a separate program for that. And same thing with the Securities and Exchange Commission.
Oh, wow. Okay. So different layers to that. Okay. And why does the government rely so much on insiders to provide that information?
Because the government just doesn't have the resources to catch it all. I heard one court describe whistleblowers as like private attorneys general. They're not the government, but right. They're on the front lines, and they hear the things in the boardrooms. They're there seeing all of it. And, the government, I think, is more proactive now, especially now that, there's so much more data, I guess, to, work with. And so I think they're more proactive in terms of trying to spot, especially, in Medicare, in terms of trying to spot, anomalies and things like that. But they just don't have the resources to catch, everybody. And you can't get everything from the data. It doesn't really tell you about intent, which is something, you have to be able to show some level of intent. So yeah, I mean, they just, whistleblowers are like the boots on the ground, the front lines in terms of seeing what's really going on day to day.
Okay. And when it comes to the misconception about whistleblowers or the FCA, do you hear most often one or the other? Is there like a misconception that you hear about being a whistleblower or the FCA?
Yeah, I think sometimes the only one a couple actually. I think sometimes people think that, they're just disgruntled employees, and sometimes they are, and sometimes rightfully so, sometimes they're retaliated against. So that's one thing. Another thing that I think you hear, I heard one defense attorney describe whistleblowers as opportunistic bounty hunters, which, I consider the source, but anyhow, most clients who come to me aren't talking about the money, right? They're just wanting to resolve an issue that's wrong. They're trying to right a wrong. But I think that one perception some may have is that they come in the door talking about the money and that it's all about the money, when I don't see that in the majority of cases.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's something I educate them about. They need to know about it, but I don't see a lot of people walking in the door saying, have I got a deal for you? Let's make money.
Right.
You know what I mean? Let's make a deal. It's right. More, is this thing yeah. They just want to right a wrong. Yeah.
Okay. Now when a potential whistleblower first contacts your office, what are you first trying to understand from that?
Yeah. So the first thing I want is, a basic overview of what's going on. Sometimes I can kind of weed out cases up front, if it's a case that doesn't involve federal funds, or, if it's not actionable, then I'll let the person know, right up front. If it looks like it, could be good on the surface, then, at that point we'll start talking, and, I'll ask them for more details. Sometimes the whistleblower has to educate me about the sector that they're in. I've had a lot of, nursing home cases, for example, but there are areas that, maybe I haven't had a case in before. And so sometimes I need them to educate me so that I can understand what the company should be doing versus what's wrong, versus what they're doing that's not right. And I also, once I understand that and kind of get a sense of whether this could be a good claim, a viable claim, I need to know exactly what evidence they have. The more specifics that a whistleblower can provide, the stronger the case, the more that the government has, to go on initially and launch their investigation. So really, I'm just trying to understand, what the client know, or what the potential client knows, what the wrong is, and what they're supposed to be doing.
Okay. Yeah. And that was going to be my follow-up question is, how do you know if it's worth investigating? But it sounds like you do a lot of due diligence in that whole process. Is there ever a situation where you feel that it's not worth investigating? Versus
well, like I mentioned, the ones that come in the door and they don't meet like some of the basic criteria, like those are ones, that I could probably not, I don't look into if up front, it looks like they don't. I wouldn't go so far as to say there's like a potential case I wouldn't investigate. There's some that I might prioritize because, maybe the allegations are stronger, maybe the evidence is stronger. But no, I wouldn't say there's a case that I wouldn't look at.
Okay. And is there a situation where it makes the matter difficult to evaluate based on the information that you received?
Yeah. Based on the information I received, or
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, if it's an area that I don't have a lot of experience in yet, that can be difficult to evaluate. Sometimes the rules and regulations are quite complex, and there's a little bit of a learning curve. So that could make it difficult. And sometimes if the whistleblower drops a lot of documents on me without a lot of context, that can make it difficult too.
Right.
So yeah, it's good to try to strike a balance between, summarizing everything and letting an attorney know the high points, right? The important stuff. And at the same time, allowing time to digest, if you will, to make it more effective. Yeah.
And it sounds like there's not one smoking gun that the whistleblower can have for you. It's going to be a lot of documentation that you will need to look through.
I've had smoking gun. No, I wouldn't say that. I've had smoking guns. I've had clients show up and they've got recordings. I've got.
Wow.
Oh yeah, yeah. I've had people who are really prepared. I've had clients who have like the patient specific documents plus the information from the doctor about how to misdiagnose people or whatever. There are sometimes smoking guns, and those are the ones I pay attention to the most up front.
Oh wow, well that's very interesting. So in regards to the recordings, do they need to go through a process to actually do that, to secretly record?
Yes. So absolutely, it matters what state you're in. So some states like Texas are what are called one-party consent states. So only one party to the conversation has to know it's being recorded. The person cannot leave a tape recorder in a room and walk out of it. They have to be there. But there are other states where all the entities, all the parties that are being recorded need to know that they're being recorded. So very important to know what state you're in. If you're in a one-party state, just don't leave the room. Don't leave the recorder in the room. You can go ahead and record. And I'm not as familiar with what you have to do in I'm in Texas, so I haven't had to deal with that specific issue. Most of the ones I've dealt with have been one-party states.
Oh wow, okay, that's really good to know. And how do you distinguish a weak case from an incomplete case?
A weak case from an incomplete case. Well, sometimes it has to do with, let me see if I can give an example. Okay. Sometimes someone might want to bring a case that I think is kind of in the gray area. Maybe, there's a regulation that they're saying is being violated. But, is it a regulation that the government bases payment on? For example, if you're bringing a case where, it's not clear that the government would, that it's something they'd really act on, or that it's something that really influenced, that it was material to their decision to pay a claim, that's weak. A case that's not developed, it could be a very strong, for example, kickback allegations, allegations that healthcare providers taking kickbacks. Maybe that whistleblower doesn't know which patients were seeing that doctor, right? And got prescriptions that maybe they wouldn't have gotten, pardon me, but for the kickbacks. But those are gaps that the government could fill in, So I would say, to answer your question, I would say, there are some cases walking in the door that I think are a little bit weaker, depending on the violation. And there are other cases where the whistleblower has all the pieces in terms of the scheme, but they just don't know exactly what was submitted to Medicare or Medicaid.
Got it. Okay. Oh, wow. Yeah, it's so much detail with all this. And I don't think whistleblowers actually know. And so that this is really great information that you're sharing here. And in regards to the potential clients, is there information that they may leave out that they may not realize that it matters, that you have to go back to them and say, this is incomplete?
I can't think of any like broad thing. Sometimes they don't tell me up front what kinds of evidence they have, and that's always going to be, a question that sorry, I'm getting a call.
Oh,
right.
no.
Anyway, the computer rings, but anyhow, so I apologize. I lost my train a tiny bit.
No.
Oh yeah, when they don't tell me up front sometimes what evidence they have, and then that's something that I have to understand, pretty soon when they bring me the case.
Okay. Yeah, that's I think that's very much key. And when it comes to your workflow, can you walk us through that from the first contact when a potential whistleblower to you and the time you want to move forward?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the initial contact might be through email. It might be, they give me a call. The first thing I want to do is understand the fraud from, 30,000 feet. What area does this affect? What does the individual know? What evidence do they have? If it's a case that, that we want to bring, that I think we want to move forward on, then we will sign an agreement, with that client, and we'll start working on the case. One thing you have to do before you file a complaint in a False Claims Act case is put together what's called a disclosure. That's a little less formal than a complaint and a little more candid. And that's something that you provide to the government. Like I said, before you file the case. So that's something that, we start working on. And, basically the client brings me everything, right? And to explain everything. And then I kind of take that and start putting it together myself. And then I'll interact with the client, as I need to, as I have questions. And then, at some point I can present them with a great synopsis and say, is this right? And they'll review it and we'll work together and that's kind of how it goes.
Oh, okay. And is there a step in the process that consumes the most time on your end?
It kind of depends on the case. If it's a case that's kind of novel that maybe I haven't had a case similar, sometimes what takes more time is research, researching all the, specific regulations, rules, guidance, all of that, on that issue, because it's going to be up to me to explain that, not every government attorney knows every single government program, right, inside out. So, some cases, that's the harder part. Other cases, the evidence is just so voluminous, that's not a bad problem to have. I'm not complaining about that, but it can take longer, to go through all of it. And, and sometimes what takes a while, and you don't always know this, but, as I'm putting together the complaint, and the disclosure, sometimes I'll think of different claims. I'll say, well, wait a second, maybe this case is, on top of this kickback statute, maybe there's also a worthless services claim or something like that. And then that might start me on another trail, So I would say for sure the most work goes into, trying to draft the disclosure statement and the complaint.
And the complaint as well. Okay. Mm-hmm. And in regards to the information from the potential client, how do you wish every potential client have this information organized for you? Do you have like a form for them to fill out for that information to send to you? Or is it just they just email you all the documentation that you need?
Yeah, so a lot of times they email it. If there are a lot of documents or if they're really sensitive documents, then we will create a link for them to use to upload the documents directly to us, through a secure site.
Okay.
So yeah, really, it depends on how many documents a lot of times that we're talking about.
Okay. Is it usually a lot of documents, or is it a few?
In a good case, there might be, there might be. No, it really depends on the case. It really depends on the whistleblower. And there are situations where, sometimes the whistleblower puts in their notice and it's a 2-week notice and the company says, no, you're out today. And then, that person doesn't have access anymore to any information, any specifics, so that happens. But, for potential clients who are, documenting fraud every step of the way, they might accumulate, a number of documents, which again is not a bad thing. Those all have to be provided to the government. Anything that is, relevant to the fraud, all that information, those documents need to be provided to the government. So it's important to give the attorney everything.
Everything, yeah. And how are you currently organizing these documents? Because I'm just imagining in my mind the link that you send to the whistleblower, and then they upload all these documents. Let's take the worst case scenario where you have the most documents. Do you currently have a way to organize all that information? Are you using any tools?
For me personally, I usually just do it myself because, and we're not talking, in the initial stages, we're not talking the volume of documents that you get once a case is in discovery. I've had cases where there are so many documents that you upload them into some kind of platform, a document review platform to look at them. But a lot of times I just kind of do it the old fashioned way. I just, just click on the document and just review the documents. There's no real magic to it. It's helpful if the client, can organize them in some way. Maybe like the title of the file tells me what it is, for example, that's helpful. Just no real magic to it, just organized in a way that I can look at it up front and say, all right, this is what I need to look at or not.
Okay, that sounds good. And in regards to whistleblowers, if I interviewed 10 whistleblower attorneys, what do you think the most of them would complain about? The most
defendants. No, I'm kidding. I'm joking. I said defendants. I'm sorry. I don't think I let you finish your question. What would they complain the most about?
Yeah, if I have asked a few different whistleblowers.
I don't know if I totally follow the question about the process.
About the whole process. Yeah.
The whole process.
Is there like a few that come up often as far as
about? Well, I think one thing that can come up is, if the government has a lack of resources, sometimes their investigations can take quite a while. Or if they're, it's just a lot of data to look at, it can take a while. And so I think a number of whistleblower attorneys probably wish that investigations move faster. But, like I said, a lot of times it's a resource issue, so I'm not trying to be critical of the government right now. But yeah, I think if I had to pick something that I think across the board, some attorneys think could be improved, it would be perhaps shortening the length of time that these cases are pending.
Okay. And Janis, without discussing confidential information, what have your clients taught you about the human side of becoming a whistleblower?
Well, I mean, some of them really have a lot of anxieties, when they come, and they might talk to me about that. Okay. Some of them, I've had some who find it very liberating. There are some who don't care as much about who knows, right? That there are some that I really have to caution and say, this is under seal. You can't go to the media. You can't go to, all your friends or post it on LinkedIn or anything like that. So I have clients too that I have to sort of hold back a little bit. They're, understandably, they want people to know that there's something wrong going on. So I kind of have to hold them back. And other clients, I kind of have to boost them up a little bit, and try to make them feel a little more secure in what they've done.
Okay. And how do you see whistleblower law and fraud investigations changing over the next 5 to 10 years?
So one thing that has changed things, I think, is AI has come into play a lot more. I think our tools for utilizing data, analyzing data, have become more sophisticated. I think we may see more cases that are based on what we call data mining. So, where the whistleblower just looks at the data and spots anomalies. I think you see that a lot in cases that involve like Paycheck Protection Program fraud. There are a number of cases that are based on data mining, basically. In terms of trends and how things might evolve, I would say I think technology is being embraced a little bit more. Hopefully that'll help decrease the amount of time that it takes to catch fraud and bring a case about it.
Okay. And if somebody watching believes they may have discovered fraud but feels frightened or uncertain, what would you want that person to know?
That you're doing the right thing, that looking into it, you're doing the right thing, that there are protections for whistleblowers. And, it's important to, I think, talk to an attorney sooner rather than later so that you understand your rights in the event that you're asked to do something that it may not be legal, or, in the event that you've refused to do something illegal and they have retaliated against you. It's important to know what your rights are in those situations.
Okay, that sounds good. Janis, thank you so much for sharing your experience on Against the Fraud and helping bringing awareness to whistleblowers and the important roles they play. This was very beneficial. I'm so grateful that you're sharing Nation on our podcast. And if a whistleblower would like to reach out to you, how can they reach you?
I work for Schneider Wallace Cottrell Kim. You can go to our website and find my bio. I'm Janis Gorton. Just look me up. Shoot me an email. Give me a call.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. Yeah, we'll have the information also to get in contact with you as well. The website. Perfect. And everything else on the podcast.